from the CyberHub bunker and studio, you're tuning in to the CyberHub podcast. And now for your host and CISO, James Azar.
It's Thursday. What's up, gang? James Azar here with the CyberHub podcast practitioner brief directly from the mouth and the point of view of the CISO. Good morning. We are live on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. Make sure you subscribe and follow us right now. I've got a very special guest coming up. You can see it kind of scrolling on the bottom. You guys had awesome feedback last time I had him on, so we brought him back again, and I may bring him back more times because he's just a lot of fun to have on the show. So make sure to comment and subscribe. We are live, so we do see and take your comments as we are on the show today. We've got a lot to talk about, including an F5 and an SAP patch, and we're going to get into the bottom line of how do we create deterrence to nation-state attackers who are targeting our organizations. So we'll get to that as well, and I brought a very, very smart person to help me figure this whole thing out. So we'll talk with Juan Rodriguez here in just a moment as we bring him on. Today's show is supported by our friends over at Whistic, so thank you for your support, folks. Let me bring in Juan, and then we're going to talk about this. Juan, good morning. How's it going?
Good morning.
How are you doing? Right. So before we get started today, though, I do want to take our ceremonial sip of coffee. So this is a very old mug. It's very funny. This says CyberHub Engaged. This was back before it was the CyberHub podcast. So I have a double espresso. All my other mugs are dirty.
I actually just looked at my mug, and it's kind of funny because I was like, oh, that's what I chose. An employee gave me that, so I did not buy that for myself.
You know, wasn't it in the office where Michael Scott had the world's best boss mug, and he's like, I bought this by myself. I bought this to myself, at the gas station.
Yeah.
World's best boss.
I did not buy this for myself.
I declare bankruptcy. All right. No more office stuff today. All right. So March 17th, next week, securing the supply chain webinar hosted by our friends over at Whistic. We're going to have Nick on, your CEO, Juan. We have Chris Roberts. We've got Gray Meyer Cleavers, the CISO over at Hollard Insurance in Australia. It's going to be a really, really fun discussion around securing the supply chain, and we'll talk a little bit about that today. The link is attached below to the description of today's show, so make sure you check it out. So let's get right into what's going on. A lot of things happening, so we want to get right into it. I'm going to address a few of these very quickly. So F5, folks, the BigIP pre-authorization RCE bug is back with 4 new CVEs, 2021 229er86, 229er87, 229er901, and 229er902. All of these are a pre-authentication, a CVSS score of 9.0 and above, all critical. All require your immediate attention. This advisory is significant, and as significant as it can come. I don't need to remind you what happened last time these BigIP vulnerabilities and RCE vulnerabilities came out. WannaCry, NotPetya, and several others have all been instigated due to some of these vulnerabilities. So again, make sure you guys get these patched immediately within your system. Our next story of the day, SAP stomps out a critical RCE flaw in their manufacturing software. So the remote code execution flaw, which also has a CVSS score of 9.8, I believe, 9.9, I'm sorry, applies to what I like to say, the perfect combination of just NetWeaver, AS, Java. Let me say those 3 things again, because you would be as old as me and Juan to remember this. NetWeaver, AS, Java. When was NetWeaver a thing?
Oh boy. It was still a thing when I started in the industry, but it's been a long time. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. So this CVE is 2021-21480. Even if you're not in manufacturing, this has a direct risk to your business, because if you do work with manufacturers, if you're relying on anything within the supply chain, if you don't have let's talk about that for just a second here. Do you think we need to have more inventory of our critical, software inventory list from our critical suppliers, so that when stuff like this happens, we're able to really understand it and mitigate it?
Yeah, I mean, I think it has to be part of your risk assessment, internal risk assessment, right? I think a lot of time when we think about risk assessments, we're looking at kind of broad topics. We're analyzing high level stuff, but I think depending on the size of your company, right? But if you're a decent size, that should be probably one of the tasks your director of engineering or your manager of engineering should be looking into. Maybe have that as part of your software development lifecycle, right? Have a tool that's scanning and tells you, your libraries and warns you. There's systems that do that. I don't know if we're allowed to shout them out, but we use a system like that where we actually know what our build is made out of, out of open sources, and what versions we're running, things like that.
Yeah, that's critical. I'm looking at this also from a supply chain perspective of my vendors, right? So I don't manufacture anything per se in my organization, but we do rely on a lot of manufacturers that help drive our business. And so if any of them are using SAP right now, I definitely want to make sure they're patching that. And I think that creates a responsibility. That's transparency, which I think is really important. And we'll talk about that in the webinar next week, folks. So make sure to sign up for that. Let's get into
absolutely. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Juan. I am very sorry.
No, I was just going to say absolutely. I mean, I was speaking, in-house, and then you think about externally, right? You ask yourself, you gotta breathe a sigh of relief, and you go, oh man, thank goodness we're not using SAP, right? But then you have to ask yourself, do my vendors use it? In this case, like if you're in manufacturing, right, you have to ask yourself, or you should know, hopefully, if you've been assessing your risk and managing your vendors, you should know, what kind of data are they processing of mine? Do they have access to it? Was that touched? So you need to ask your vendors these questions. Us us in the industry, we actually give away this questionnaire for this, like kind of like we did for SolarWinds. We're doing this for our customers as well, where we're saying like, hey, you can send out this questionnaire free of charge. It's not counted towards your contract, essentially, because we think it's that important.
Yeah, it's critical to know the downstream software, especially in the aftermath of SolarWinds, now with Microsoft Exchange, and all these different bugs. We're going to talk a lot about that on the webinar, and I don't mean to hammer that point home for those listening or watching, but I think it's really important that you be part of that conversation. We're going to talk a lot about transparency and partnership, and the idea of how do we do that, because our next story kind of highlights the fact of why cybercrime is so darn successful and why we as defenders are always behind the 8 ball on this one. And you guys can disagree with me, you guys can comment and say, James, you're wrong, but here's the story. Europol unlocked the encrypted Sky ECC chat service to make arrests. Sky ECC is a software that's kind of runs off the BlackBerry kind of RIM kind of thing. Oh, we have an encrypted messaging software, kind of like a BBM, and people can use it, and you can load our software either through an Android device, or you can, jailbreak a phone and really put our software to replace the one that's on it. And we help you cyber criminals stay off the grid. Well, more than 20% of Sky ECC's user base is actually formed of customers that are based in Belgium and the Netherlands. And so our European counterparts have successfully unlocked the encryption. They didn't say how. Okay, so Juan and I, as we were talking about this earlier, we're like, I wonder how they did this. Right? And so there's a few ways they could have done this, Juan. What's your theory? How do you think they did this one?
I think they probably rolled their own security or their own encryption, or kind of how you were saying, I think that's a good theory, is they got someone on the inside, got the keys, something like that. Yeah, and then they had their own reason, right? They claim. What were you saying, that they cloned it?
Yeah, so Sky ECC says they were cloned, but nonetheless, what law enforcement did here is they got access to the messaging tool. We're able to see hundreds of millions of messages between the criminals, identify who they were, and make numerous arrests, including house searches and seizures, all earlier this week. The operation is an essential part of the continuous effort of judiciary and law enforcement in the EU and third countries to disrupt the illegal use of encrypted communication, according to Europol. I have a lot of friends over at Europol, Juan. I love those guys. I really do. They're hardworking people who really want to try and take a bite out of this stuff. So Sky ECC obviously denies that someone cracked their encryption. No one can crack them. We're encrypted.
Never.
Hey, don't you know encryption means security, man? You don't need to do anything. Just encrypt your stuff. You're done.
No policies, no procedures, no development life cycle, none of it. Encryption.
None of it. There's a significant challenge with this one, folks. And Sky ECC says that their platform remains secure and no authorized Sky ECC device has been hacked. I wonder how they know that.
That's a good point. How do they literally know that, right?
How do you know everything that goes on in every device? Very, very interesting.
Like maybe, how would they know that? I don't know. Do they claim they have end-to-end encryption? I don't know.
Well, if your devices are encrypted, right, and you don't see anything, then you would have no way to know that any of the authorized devices have been hacked.
That's what I'm saying. How do you know that? So at the very least, maybe if they claim it's not really end-to-end encryption, then maybe they could know. Interesting.
Yeah, it's welcome to the world of PR running this stuff. So this one's really interesting, and I kind of want to end. This week has been a very, very challenging week from a lot of perspectives. We did the Tech Town Square last night, and we talked about the Microsoft Exchange 0 day. And Juan and I were not going to get into it. We really want to talk more about what government could do. So here's a few things that government wants to do, and we'll talk about this. The first one, they want to make a bill so that we can sue foreign cyber actors who harm them in any way. So they want to allow. So how do you harm me? What is harm? This is the problem with some of our lawmakers. This bill, which was introduced by Jack Bergman out of Missouri, Colin Allard out of Texas, Brian Fitzpatrick out of Pennsylvania, Jamie Herrera Butler out of Washington State, Joe Nikuz out of Colorado, and Andy Kim out of Jersey. Per the bill, Americans would be able to make claims in federal or state courts if they are in any way affected by cyber attacks that foreign states have conducted against them. They call it the HACT Act. I mean, there's some staffers that are sitting in DC right now that are going like, this is brilliant. This is so smart, right? Like, play on words. Do you think this bill is a deterrent for nation states?
No. I mean, who do you sue? There's better ways of doing this. So no.
Yeah, you're going to sue the Communist Party of China?
I guess. Like, that's the thing. It's like, no, it's not happening.
You know, there was something. So we passed a similar bill, right? Washington, you know what they do is they recycle old bills to new solutions. A similar bill like this was passed post 9/11 that essentially allowed the families of victims of terror attacks across the U.S. to sue any organization, company, or government that supported the terror organization that caused the loss of life. In cyber, that's not the same because we don't understand harm. We can't prove harm by the legal definition of harm as per se a terror attack.
Right. Yeah, I do remember the 9/11 family. Is that the bill they used to sue Saudi Arabia?
Yeah, it's the bill they used to sue Saudi Arabia. They used it to sue Pakistan and Afghanistan. Those bills, by the way, all got thrown out of court.
Yep, exactly. Yeah,
right, because that became a political gambit. So I don't know what this bill is supposed to do. You're going to go sue the communist, the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, in federal court in New York. I mean, really? That's what you're going to do?
Yeah.
This creates zero deterrence.
But I think it created jobs because people are writing it.
So they're not creating jobs. It's just people that are saying like, it's these people already have jobs. We do need to have more concrete deterrence. So it takes us to the challenge. This is a great story, by the way, by the AFP, and highlighted here by Security Week. So the latest mass hacks highlight the challenge for the Biden administration. So I want to say two things. I think credit where credit is due. This president took cybersecurity very, very seriously. Not to say the previous administration didn't, but actions speak louder than words. And the previous administration said a bunch of stuff, but they didn't really have the people in the White House doing the work. This administration, one of their first orders of business during their transition was to bring in Ann Neuberger and her team from the NSA over to the White House as cybersecurity policy advisors to the president, which is something I believe President Trump did not have. So let's start with where credit is due. This administration sees cybersecurity as something very serious, something that they consider to be at a national security level, and have brought in advisors to the president that work out of the West Wing of the White House to do this. Credit. Yeah. Okay?
Credit.
Now, we get into what are they going to do? And so this article talks about hacking back. So President Trump kind of did do this, and this is one of the executive orders that this administration did in reverse, which was Directive PPD 20 in 2017, that essentially reversed the previous executive order by President Obama that said no hackbacks, no nothing, naming and shaming. President Trump took that away and said if you attack the U.S. or any of our companies or any of our government, then we can hack back. And he kind of took the gloves off of NSA and DOD and Cyber Command. And we have launched a bunch of cyber attacks in the years of Trump and of President Trump in office. The question is, what's the response? And again, Ann Neuberger, who's the senior White House cybersecurity advisor, said her team was looking at a holistic retaliation. And I don't know what that means, but what would be the appropriate response, or what would be kind of, I'm not going to ask you for the appropriate response. I think that's too much pressure on your shoulders, Juan. What would be one or two things you think would create a deterrent for nation states?
Well, I mean, if I give the perfect response, maybe I'll get hired, right? I'll be in DC. No, but I mean, there's political solutions for this, right? That's what sanctions are for. I mean, if I was gonna defend hackback, but maybe I won't.
Well, no,
I mean, it's an option.
Well, I don't think that we don't hack back. I think we hack back. I think the only difference is that our adversaries, so China and Russia, don't have a free press. So the hackbacks never make it to their papers, right? They kill it as it happens.
That's fair.
Right? The only reason
it doesn't have the same effect.
Correct. Because they want to kind of show superior. They don't want to show their vulnerability to their population, because that could create a revolt. When you're a communist regime and you're holding your people down, if your people see someone successfully attacking you, your people might get the idea that they can do that as well.
Yeah, that's a fair point. So then I guess I lean back more towards sanctions, because I think part of it is we don't even acknowledge it a lot of times, right? Like, I think, and that kind of gives the other countries a pass. They kind of feel like they can do it, and I think even the people feel like, well, what is my government doing to protect me? So I think the fact that we don't acknowledge it kind of creates kind of that feeling, at least in the populace.
It does. We have a lot of work ahead of us when it comes to creating a actual deterrent in cybersecurity, because the reason we haven't had a bunch of terror attacks on the U.S. in the 20 years since 9/11, and then we're rounding out 20 years literally 6 months from today. Can you believe that?
Yeah. Well, my gray hairs tell me yes.
Well, my memory reminds me of the fact that I was just about to ship out to basic this time 19 and a half years ago. So.
Oh, really? I was getting out of the Army at that point, or right around that time.
I was finishing high school. This 19 and a half years ago, I was wrapping up high school and getting ready to ship to basic in May of 2001. So I will say that was a quite the journey. But the reason we don't have another 9/11 or haven't had one since is, one, our intelligence is much better, but the deterrent is there. You come and attack us, we're going to bomb the living daylights out of wherever you are. And so most countries where even these terrorists operate are like, how about you don't go over there? Just stay here. Attack foreigners within our borders, but just please don't go to the US and do something, because, I will point out the fact that we've arrested at the border so far this year, since January, 78 people who were from Iranian and Afghani origins that were trying to cross illegally into the US. So
from the north or the south?
From the south, from Mexico.
Okay.
Yeah, Canada's a little bit more cautious about who they let into their borders. Mexico is not so much so. So it's also a different border. Although the Canadian border has no fence whatsoever. So let's keep that in mind.
They don't have a beautiful wall.
They don't have a beautiful wall. They don't. All right, folks. That's it for our practitioner brief today. We're all set, wrapped up. Juan, thank you so much for coming on the show. March 17th, our webinar on securing the supply chain with Nick Sorensen, your CEO, who I'm very excited. We're going to talk about vendor risk management, transparency, accountability, and partnership. And I think it's going to be great. It's going to feature Nick Sorensen, Gray Meyer Cleaves, MGM. As I like to, GMG. Sorry, GMG. Wow, why did I say MGM? I'm thinking Vegas. Vegas, baby. So GMG will be joining me. If you haven't heard of Gray, go back and check out the CISO Talk podcast that's live right now with Gray. The guy's going to drop a bunch of nuggets on you, really blow your brains out. And then the man, the beard, and the legend, Chris Roberts, will be joining us as well. And we're going to have 3 different points of view on this webinar, folks. We're going to have the business side from Nick. We're going to have the practitioner side from Gray. And we're going to have the attacker side from Chris. And we're going to talk about the supply chain from those 3 points of view. So it won't be another one of those boring webinars where everyone says, I completely agree with what you have to say. We did a pre-call yesterday, and let me tell you guys, it was fun. It was fun. So you don't want to miss that. March 17th, 3 p.m. Eastern. Sign up now. Even if you can't attend, register. You'll get the recording after the webinar is over directly in your inbox so you can watch it. Until then, Juan, thank you again. Have a great weekend, sir. To everyone watching, stay healthy. And most importantly, stay cyber safe. We'll be back on Monday with a lot more. Cheers.
We love feedback, so make sure to connect with us on social media and subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast listening platform.